not exactly the guest we expected. The sarcasm hung in the air, cruel and calculated. Selena Carter froze, the chandelier's glow making her vulnerability impossible to hide. Around her, laughter dimmed into murmurs, and judgment tightened its grip. But Damian Holt, the man who commanded boardrooms and skylines, saw only her. And what he did next shattered every rule in that glittering room. Stay with us. Because what began as mockery ended in a declaration no one dared to challenge. The Astoria Hotel glowed with the kind of grandeur that felt almost unreal, its gilded chandeliers scattering light like 1,000 captured stars. Outside, carriages of sleek black cars lined the curb, their drivers whispering into radios as guests stepped out in glittering heels and tailored suits. Inside, the air was sweet with roses and heavy with money, every detail curated to perfection. A gospel choir's voices drifted through the atrium in low rehearsal, the sound carrying like a sacred promise. Photographers circled discreetly, snapping candids that would land in glossy society pages by morning. This was not merely a wedding. It was the stage on which reputations would be displayed, alliances cemented, and envy quietly brewed in the corners. Damian Holt arrived without flourish, but he didn't need it. His presence filled the marble foyer as surely as the music did. 36, striking in a midnight tuxedo that sculpted his broad frame, he carried himself with the calm weight of someone who never had to announce himself. His bronze skin seemed to drink in the golden light, and his steel-gray eyes swept the room with quiet authority. Conversations faltered briefly when he passed, not because he sought attention, but because attention naturally bent toward him. He was accustomed to that. Boardrooms, banquets, fundraisers. But tonight he wasn't here to expand his empire. Tonight he was here because friendship demanded it. Marcus Langston, his oldest friend, had trusted him with the honor of standing as best man. It was Marcus's sister's wedding, a union that had been whispered about for months, rumored, dissected, and envied. Damian had known Marcus since they were both awkward teenagers, sharing dreams bigger than their neighborhoods, long before the millions and the headlines. To see Marcus now, standing at the pinnacle of family and wealth, made Damian proud in a way few things could. Yet even as he stood among silks and jewels, his role was curiously dual. On one hand, he was a guest of honor, the billionaire who had built towers of glass that touched city skylines. On the other hand, he was simply a man in a suit, present for his friend's joy. He let the hum of laughter, the clinking of crystal flutes, and the rustle of gowns wash over him. For once, he wasn't at the center of negotiation or expectation. But fate has a way of shifting a man's evening when he least anticipates it. And though Damian could not yet know, somewhere in that glittering crowd, beneath roses and chandeliers, waited the one encounter that would alter the rhythm of his life forever. Selena Carter lingered near the far edge of the ballroom, half hidden by a towering floral arrangement of roses and hydrangeas that nearly touched the vaulted ceiling. She adjusted the hem of her dress for the third time, though the satin fit her well, its deep blue fabric catching the candlelight like the surface of a calm sea. It wasn't the dress that made her uneasy. It was the air around her, thick with the hum of money and the casual entitlement of those who had never known the weight of a grocery bill. She felt eyes skim over her without recognition, as though she were part of the decor, a shadow in a room meant for brighter names. Yet even as she shrank from the spectacle, there was something about her that resisted invisibility. Her skin glowed beneath the chandelier's golden light, rich and smooth, her features sharpened by the soft curls pinned elegantly back from her face. She had spent hours convincing herself she belonged, that the invitation sent by the bride, her childhood friend, Lila Langston, was enough. But belonging in theory was different from standing in a hall where champagne flowed like water and the smallest smile carried the weight of status. Selena clasped her hands around the stem of her glass and reminded herself that she was here because she mattered to Lila, not because she fit the mold of the guests who glittered in sequins and pearls. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't famous. She wasn't chasing contracts or fortunes. She taught poetry and novels to students who were more accustomed to concrete walls than chandeliers. Her world was lined with paperback books and chalk dust, not crystal vases or imported wine. And yet, as she stood in the corner of the Astoria Hotel ballroom, there was a quiet elegance in her stillness, a dignity that could not be bought. Across the room, Damian Holt caught sight of her without meaning to. He had been listening absently to the chatter of investors and old family acquaintances when his gaze shifted, drawn as though by instinct. She was not trying to command the space, yet she did. There was something in the way she tilted her head, cautious but resolute, as though she refused to let herself disappear entirely. For a man accustomed to ambition dressed in diamonds and desire cloaked in silk, the sight of a woman who carried herself with unassuming grace was disarming. He realized, almost reluctantly, that he was staring, and in that moment, though neither knew it, the evening had already begun to tilt in a direction neither could have imagined. The ballroom seemed to hum louder after that brief exchange, though neither Damian nor Selena had spoken enough words to warrant such attention. Yet attention was exactly what they had drawn. Eyes flicked in their direction, lips curved into knowing smirks, and fans fluttered against sequined bodices as whispers slithered from one cluster of guests to another. The presence of Damian Holt anywhere was enough to bend conversation, but the sight of him pausing, truly pausing, to exchange words with a woman they didn't recognize was more than gossip. It was an intrigue, a story blooming before the vows had even been spoken. Marcus Langston, radiant in his groom's attire, noticed before long. With a laugh that only half masked his curiosity, he strode over and clapped Damian on the shoulder. "You've got work to do up here, not over there," he said, tone light but edged with a caution born of knowing his friend's reputation. Damian smirked, brushed the comment away with practiced ease, but Marcus's glance lingered on Selena, a silent reminder of the social lines that carved this room in marble. Selena felt the burn of that glance more than she wanted to admit. Her cheeks flushed, and suddenly the air seemed too tight, the chandeliers too bright. She excused herself quickly, murmuring something polite, and slipped through the tall glass doors onto the veranda. The sudden coolness of the night met her like a blessing. Out here, the hum of violins softened into a distant echo, replaced by the low murmur of the Mississippi River winding its steady path beneath the city lights. The skyline glittered, lanterns swayed in the evening breeze, and for the first time all night, Selena breathed without feeling watched. But peace was short-lived. The doors opened behind her with a deliberate creak, and Damian stepped out, his silhouette framed by the glow of the ballroom. He didn't speak immediately. He simply stood a pace away, hands in his pockets, eyes taking in the same skyline she had been staring at seconds earlier. The silence stretched, not awkward but charged, thick with something unnamed. Selena turned slightly, her profile etched in silver moonlight, and found his gaze steady on her, not with scrutiny, but with intent. She knew he should have returned to the celebration, to his duties and his place among the wealthy. Yet here he was, drawn by something neither of them could name, and though the city sparkled all around them, it was the quiet space between them that felt like the center of the world. The night air was warm but gentle, carrying with it the faint scent of magnolias from the courtyard below. Selena leaned lightly against the stone balustrade, her fingers tracing idle patterns on its cool surface as she spoke, She told him about her students, about the boy who found his voice through Baldwin's words, the girl who clung to poetry as though it were a lifeline, the way a classroom could become a sanctuary when the world outside felt unkind. Her voice softened and brightened in turns, weaving pictures of lives far removed from the gilded walls behind them. Damian listened without interruption, his gaze fixed not on the skyline, but on her. It wasn't just the cadence of her voice that held him, it was the honesty in it. So many conversations in his world were barbed with expectation, women who leaned in close, their laughter rehearsed, their questions always circling back to his wealth, his holdings, his next acquisition. With Selena, there was none of that. She didn't ask about the skyscrapers that wore his name, or the jets parked under his command. She spoke as though those things didn't matter at all, and for the first time in a long while, he felt as though maybe they didn't. When she finally paused, cheeks glowing with the rush of sharing too much, she laughed softly. "I'm sure this isn't what you came out here to hear," she said, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. Damian's lips curved into the faintest smile. "It's exactly what I came out here to hear," he replied, his tone low but certain. For a moment, the hum of the wedding inside seemed very far away. The light from the chandeliers spilled through the glass doors behind them, casting a warm halo around her silhouette. Selena knew she should return, that lingering too long beside him was dangerous, not because of him, but because of what it meant. She was no heiress, no socialite polished for this stage. She was a woman with modest means, a teacher with ink stains on her fingers and lesson plans folded in her bag. Yet her heart urged her to stay, to hold on to this rare space where she felt both exposed and seen. Damian shifted closer, his presence steady, unhurried. "You make the world sound bigger," he said quietly. And in the charged silence that followed, Selena felt it too. That in his eyes for the first time that evening, she wasn't out of place at all. The garden stretched out behind the hotel like a secret, lanterns strung between cypress trees swaying in the humid night. Selena moved quickly, her heels crunching over gravel, her heart pounding with the sting of words that had not even been aimed directly at her, but carried enough venom to pierce her pride. She hated that she had heard them, hated more that they echoed truths she had always known. She did not belong in that ballroom, not among names that decorated buildings and bank accounts, not beside Damian Holt, whose very presence made entire rooms shift. She pressed a hand to her chest, breathing deeply, willing herself not to care, not to feel the old ache of being measured and found wanting. But footsteps followed, firm, steady, relentless. Damian's voice cut through the quiet. "So this is where you disappear?" Selena moved quickly, her heels crunching over gravel, her heart pounding with the sting of words that had not even been aimed directly at her, but carried enough venom to pierce her pride. She hated that she had heard them, hated more that they echoed truths she had always known. She did not belong in that ballroom, not among names that decorated buildings and bank accounts, not beside Damian Holt, whose very presence made entire rooms shift. She pressed a hand to her chest, breathing deeply, willing herself not to care, not to feel the old ache of being measured and found wanting. But footsteps followed, firm, steady, relentless. Damian's voice cut through the quiet. "So this is where you disappear?" She turned, startled, finding him framed by the glow of lanterns, his tuxedo jacket loosened. His expression caught somewhere between frustration and something gentler. He came closer, not rushing, but with the kind of intent that refused to be ignored. "I didn't want to make trouble," she said quickly, folding her arms as if to shield herself. "They were already talking, and you don't need—" "What I need," he interrupted softly, "is not to watch you walk away because of them." Selena shook her head, her throat tightening. You don't hear the way they speak, Damian. To them, I'm nothing. A friend of the bride, a school teacher, a girl who doesn't fit into their polished world. And you. She stopped, unable to finish. And I, he pressed, his gaze steady. And you're someone they'd kill to stand beside, she whispered. I won't be the reason they sneer at you. For a long moment, the air between them was still. The sounds of laughter from inside felt like a different universe, far away and irrelevant. Damian stepped closer until the glow of the lantern lit the silver at his temples and the fierce set of his jaw. Let them sneer, he said, his voice quiet but resolute. They mistake money for worth. I don't. Selena swallowed hard, her composure trembling at the edges. She had built walls out of humility, out of pride, out of survival. And yet here he was, seeing past them with a clarity that unsettled her more than any cruel whisper could. She wanted to retreat, but something stronger kept her rooted. In the garden's hush, with the river's murmur beyond, the weight of worlds seemed to press in. Yet between them, there was only the fragile, undeniable pull of truth. The bouquet lay at Selena's feet as though the room itself had conspired to place her at the center of its gaze. Her breath caught, her cheeks heating as laughter faltered into uneasy silence. She had prayed for invisibility, for the safety of the margins, yet fate had pulled her into the spotlight with a cruel kind of precision. Every glittering guest, every pearl-draped matron and tuxedoed heir turned to look at her as though she had trespassed into a world that was never hers to claim. Her fingers twitched at her sides, aching to retreat, to melt into the marble floor. And then came Damian's voice. Calm, rich, resonant enough to reach every corner of the hall. Looks like fate has its own guest list. The words landed like thunder, their weight undeniable, cutting through the whispers before they could begin. He didn't smile, didn't make light of the moment. He simply stepped forward, steady and certain, closing the space between them in full view of all. It was not just a gesture, it was a declaration. Her fingers twitched at her sides, aching to retreat, to melt into the marble floor. And then came Damian's voice, calm, rich, resonant enough to reach every corner of the hall. Looks like fate has its own guest list. The words landed like thunder, their weight undeniable, cutting through the whispers before they could begin. He didn't smile, didn't make light of the moment. He simply stepped forward, steady and certain, closing the space between them in full view of all. It was not just a gesture, it was a declaration. Claudia Langston's scoff was sharp enough to be heard above the gasps, her pearls rattling as she turned in outrage. This is absurd, she muttered, though her words only deepened the silence that had fallen. Marcus, standing at the head table, blinked once, his jaw tightening as though torn between friendship and the weight of propriety. But Damian never wavered. He reached the edge of the crowd, his gaze fixed solely on Selena. Selena's heart pounded so violently she thought the sound might betray her. She wanted to protest, to insist that he not make such a spectacle, that the whispers would turn to daggers and the daggers to headlines. But she could not move, could not speak, caught between fear and the dizzying pull of being chosen, truly chosen, in a room designed to erase her. He bent slightly, not to pick up the bouquet, but to stand at her side. Well, he asked softly, though the question was for her alone. His hand brushed hers, not forceful, but offering. Around them the silence deepened, the weight of judgment palpable. Yet in his touch, there was no hesitation, only the steady promise that he would not abandon her to the murmur of disapproval. Selena finally drew in a breath, straightening her shoulders. The flowers lay forgotten at her feet, but the choice had already been made. not by the toss of the bride, but by the man who stood beside her, unapologetic, unyielding. And as the ballroom held its collective breath, Selena realized that sometimes love does not whisper in secret. It claims its place in the open, no matter the cost. The air outside was softer than inside the ballroom, the hum of violins and clinking crystal replaced by the chorus of crickets and the faint rush of the Mississippi beyond. Selena stepped carefully down the marble steps, the night pressing cool against her flushed skin, Damian steady at her side. Behind them, the Astoria glowed like a jeweled fortress, the faint chatter of guests still swirling inside, a world of silk and whispers that felt a lifetime away. For once, she wasn't slipping out in retreat. She was walking out in full view, her hand brushing his, her heart beating in rhythm with a choice that had already been made. Questions trailed them like shadows. Some guests peered through the glass, astonishment etched into their faces, others whispering furiously as if their words could undo what they had just witnessed. Yet the farther they moved from the ballroom's glow, the less any of it seemed to matter. Damian's presence alone was enough to silence the noise in her chest. He wasn't the billionaire then, not the untouchable figure in headlines and business journals. He was just a man, standing in the soft halo of lantern light, speaking not from power but from something raw and unpolished. "I've built towers that touch the sky," he told her, his voice low enough that only the night could carry it. "But I've never met someone who made me want to stay grounded, until now." The words weren't rehearsed, weren't delivered like a line meant to charm. They were stripped down, honest, and they rooted her where she stood. Selena's lips curved into a smile, small at first, then broke into something fuller, warmer. She wasn't naive. She knew the road ahead would not be smooth. But in that moment, none of the obstacles seemed greater than the force drawing them together. Selena's lips curved into a smile, small at first, then broke into something fuller, warmer. She wasn't naive. She knew the road ahead would not be smooth. But in that moment, none of the obstacles seemed greater than the force drawing them together. She tilted her face toward the night sky, its darkness punctured by stars that seemed to wink in approval, and let herself imagine what it might mean to be chosen not in secret, but in the open, before the world. Damian's hand finally closed around hers, firm and steady, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she matched his step as they descended the last of the stairs. Love, she realized, didn't always arrive in the perfect package, wrapped in acceptance and applause. Sometimes it came awkwardly, unexpectedly, under the scrutiny of those who doubted it most. But sometimes, too, it came exactly when it was meant to, like tonight, beneath lantern light, with the Mississippi whispering promises that only they could hear. If this story resonated with you, share it. Selena's journey reminds us that the world may judge by wealth and status, but real worth is proven by grace, dignity, and courage. Someone watching tonight may need that reminder. Comment below if you've ever been overlooked, only to rise stronger because of it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, drop a comment, and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe to Black Stories Untold for more stories that uncover hidden struggles, celebrate strength, and remind us that every voice matters.